It's some not good ideas.
I got you. Everybody, I want you to look over this writing prompt for this week's essay. Remember, you've got to do 10, and there are now not 10 left, or not 15 left, right? So I went through, for a few people, added zeros for, I think, writing summit 3 if they hadn't done any of the first 4, just to kind of put a little fire under some people that we need to do these. Here's this next one. Before we do this, let me say some other things. Also, how are we doing? It's the 7th week, right? How are we doing? Are we drained, tired? Right? That's how we feel this time of the semester. That's how I feel this time of the semester. I get paid well enough to wake up in the morning. Okay, show some energy here. You don't feel it, but you're gonna fake it. So I'm gonna fake it. Maybe you all can fake it a little bit too, right? If we don't feel it, here we are. We're gonna decide to be in this. You know, the bummer is that in spring semester, at this time, you have spring break to look forward to. We don't. And so we got to live with this. So I'm going to come in. I reworked my whole lecture today, this morning, so I can be a little bit more excited and in tune, so I can add some energy that hopefully it isn't here. So just accept where we are. We're right in that doldrums. Also, next week, I have to go to Texas. I had to go there earlier in the semester, right? And skip a class, didn't I, on Monday? I need to go be there with them while with the family stuff. So I need to go be there next week, but I'm going to Zoom our classes, and I'm going to invite you to come and watch the Zoom. I'm not going to require it, but please show up, because being at my dad's house in Texas with all his stuff going on and then Zooming to an empty Zoom room would make a very depressed teacher. So please do me a personal favor of showing up to the Zoom. I'll send you that link, and then I'll also have it recorded so you can watch it. Both the online class, of course, can have it, so you guys can have it. I just need to go out there to help them through a tough time. So now to this. So we're going to talk about something pretty epic, and that is, you know, how economists look at when markets fail. And one of those market failures is pollution, and pollution as it contributes to climate change, and really dissecting how, and really in a way what this lecture is kind of my argument against my liberal environmentalist friends. Some of my more liberal environmentalist friends say that economists are to blame and that we have made this problem worse, when in fact economists are the ones that study this problem and show that in fact there's a problem because of the economy. The way the economy works, we've created these environmental problems. And so I want to do it in a way that's going to welcome everybody in, because I know we have different groups in this room, different political persuasions, and different understandings of ideas. And so in light of that, the things that I want you to read and or watch come from 3 different perspectives. One's from a conservative perspective, one's from a liberal perspective, and one's conservative, one's more liberal, and one's super liberal, I think. Yeah, so I'm giving you, and then I'll give you today a much more super conservative one, and I'll try to do it as good, give it as much justice as I can. But of course, when you're talking about climate change, if you know the politics of it, some on the conservative end of the spectrum have just said it doesn't exist. So it's hard for me to really address that if there's not an understanding of the science. And if you don't have an understanding of the science of climate change, what I've done, and this is totally optional, is I've added a link here to the report that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, here it is. So it's a 96 megabit file. You want to read that, but here's my point. In this file, if you hit Control F and search for references, you'll see thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed scientific journals that are referenced. And it's really hard to say that every scientific journal over decades has gotten this scientific problem wrong. The overwhelming majority of the evidence is that climate change is being made worse by human activity and economic activity. And so I give you that, and then the executive summary, and then something else here that's showing something about climate change changing how currents are moving in the ocean, and the way currents move in the ocean with either hot or colder water change climate everywhere. And that looks like it's a tipping point. So I'm not going to give much space for it doesn't exist, because there needs to be evidence for it not existing, and there isn't that evidence.
Personally, I believe that it exists.
Yeah.
I wonder how many peer-reviewed sources there are for it doesn't exist. Do you have
There are some.
Yeah.
There are some that point out to one or two facets of the studies that were incorrect or overstated, which happens in science. And I'll say this also, science is about uncertainty, not certainty. A lot of people during COVID were saying, well, I'm following the science. And I kind of laugh because, like, no, science isn't that we know this. Science is that we kind of know this, and we need to keep testing and testing and testing. And so if you know the scientific method, it is that you state something isn't related to something. Do you remember that? The null hypothesis. And then you try to disprove the null hypothesis. But the very center of scientific inquiry is uncertainty. And could it even be that climate change is caused by intergalactic ferries that we can't see? Could that be? No, really. This is real scientific thought. Could it be the intergalactic ferries that we can't see are causing climate change? Is that a possibility? I have to acknowledge that that's a possibility, right? Because that's science. I can't prove that that's wrong. But the point being, there's so many thousands of peer-reviewed studies that are reinforcing the same belief. It seems that it isn't intergalactic ferries, right? It does seem like, yes, it's natural movements in the Earth's climate, but also made worse by human activity. So with that, oh, well, let me go back to the writing assignment. So this is going to be a traditional essay where I want you to have, so what do you believe should be done about climate change in terms of economic policy? One idea is to change our tax system from one based on income tax to one based on a carbon tax, otherwise known as a pollution tax. So get this. So even for conservatives, maybe on the side of being a little bit more skeptical of climate change, or being a little bit more skeptical of really top-down, intrusive liberal ideas to get in the way of climate change, why not get rid of income tax and instead tax the pollution and products? So you get all the money you make, and you only pay taxes when you buy something with pollution. And that's, you're going to hear in a TED talk I'll play for you next class, a conservative saying, well, here's conservative values, and here's a policy that can work around that. Get rid of income tax, and let's tax the bad thing, not the good thing. Right? Work's a good thing. We want people to be working. Why tax that? So what I give your reader, so as I say here, what's your opinion about such a change? Come up with a one-sentence thesis statement on this subject. So a thesis statement is just a subject and an opinion. So the subject here is climate change, and your opinion is about some kind of economic policy. So I just want you to have one sentence that states that. We'll play with that idea next class. I also want you to have a really engaging introduction. So give your reader some context from the articles, the blog post, and or the TED talk to introduce your topic and set up the scene. Think about, I always try to teach, and I always try to do when I write something, think about some kind of theme, metaphor, movie, cultural artifact, song, what do I say here, idea, anything in culture, and use that as a metaphor for what you're going to state, and then bring that up in the introduction to grab your reader, and go through your points, and then bring up that metaphor, that cartoon, that song, that movie, that idea back up in your conclusion to sum up your arguments in kind of an interesting way that goes back to your introduction. So you need to have a thesis, introduction, 3 body paragraphs, 2 quotes from the source material, and then a concluding paragraph. We'll come back over this more. Any questions before I dive in? All right, lots of notes today. Pick up some paper. We're going to get started here. Testing. Okay, my mic's working. what worked better, this light off up here? So I'm going to start with the idea of a market failure. For those of you both here in person and online who are taking both classes, these two classes today kind of mirror each other about how an economic system can create great benefits, but also leave some people out in the macroeconomic terms, and in this case, actually not serve the interests of society. And so I'm going to do some definitions here. I normally don't do this, but I want to go through this somewhat methodically because I've kind of rethought about how to do this lesson. So this is when we have a mispriced, bless you, and or misallocated say there are 30 people in here and I have 30 jelly beans. What would be a misallocation of those 30 jelly beans? He gets 5. Do you get how that's a misallocation? Just trying to define this word, right? Misallocation means something isn't divided up in a way that's appropriate, whatever appropriate means. So what would be a perfect allocation of 30 jelly beans for 30 people? Everyone gets 1. So there's just making sure we understand misallocated. So this misallocated or mispriced resources that move society away from what is socially optimal. This is what got me into economics. I went to college because I wanted to be an American diplomat. I wanted to change the world. I wanted to see the world become more peaceful, more prosperous. And economics was the only place where I was finding the study of how to correct for things to get towards more social optimality, right? If I'm going to get an education, I want that education to make the world a better place. Did I help in any regard in that way? I don't know. Maybe a little bit teaching here and there, but I think that's why, to me, economics is a beautiful field of study. Now, next thing, positive economics. You recall what positive, remember normative and positive? Positive was what? Normative was your own personal opinion. Positive was, yeah, so this is facts and data. Let's go back to science. Does sometimes our understanding of what we thought was factual change? Today, the Nobel Prize for, I think it's biology, went to a guy who changed understanding about how humans evolved from partially Neanderthals. It was thought that they weren't part of our lineage, but in fact, we have some Neanderthal in us. Anybody excited about that? All right. So the facts and data can change, right? As the scientific method is employed, we learn new things. So this isn't necessarily static, right? But hopefully over time with lots of studies, you get to something that's static or a fixed piece of known data. Now, here is something that is, even though if you know the political divide around pollution and environmental policy, even the most conservative economist would say that these are facts. So I want to start from a place where we have no political disagreement. So products that pollute or have pollution in their production process and cause human harm let me call this out for a second, just point towards human. Am I leaving something out here if I'm talking about pollution? What am I leaving out? Yeah, plants, insects. We completely leave that out in economics. Do you see some value in having an environment and plants? And some of us do, maybe no, but so we focus on just what humans value. And so there is something left out here. There is an apt critique that economists don't focus on the larger planetary picture. But we do look at this, and we do our economic studies about saving the environment and the value of saving the environment. We don't ask above how much they value their life. We don't ask a tree or an ecosystem how much they value themselves. We ask humans, how much would you pay to go visit that place? How much would I have to pay you for that forest to be gone? How much would you pay for that forest to be available to your grandchildren? So I hope you're getting what my point is. We leave out all of that animal environment stuff and just make it human focused and how we see value there, not whatever its inherent value might be. That's super philosophical there. I'm going to leave that philosophy right there. You take that home with you and think about it. So we're only focusing on the human perceptions there. And then switching here a little bit, and services that help. Again, human well-being. And those services, not art, interesting, Freudian slip. Aren't priced and or allocated by a free market. So all economists, conservative, liberal, no matter what their political stripes are, no matter what they believe about the role of government, no matter what they believe about the role of the individual and personal freedom, all economists know that markets fail. And it's true that products that pollute cause harm to human health, and it's services that help human well-being aren't priced appropriately. And I'll give you two examples, and one you already know. So let's draw underneath this two X and Y axes to show two different markets. Do a new one first, K-12 education. How much did your parents pay directly for your K-12 education? Directly. Did they pay? Did they have to pay? Did they have to go into the office and cut a check? Right. So indirectly, we all pay through property taxes, right? In taxes, but directly we didn't pay anything. Right. That's something that's given as what we call a public good. So this is called a public good, meaning it's available to everybody. Now that's not true in every country. Free K-12, much less free K, is free in every country. In the undeveloped countries I go to, there are people who just don't go to school. They do not have schools for everybody. In fact, in most developing countries, if you want to go to school beyond a certain year, your parents have to pay. So that leaves schooling only to those who can afford it. And a lot of development groups give money to countries just to try to send, especially poor kids, to a little bit more school. I know, at least in the past, Mexico, to go to high school, you had to pay. I don't know if that's changed. It's still the case. That's a bad, no offense to Mexico. That's a bad public policy, because having everybody go to school, if high school is useful, right? Let me just lay that out there, right? If it's a useful high school experience, which I'm going to put a big question mark, but let's assume high school could be more useful. If that's useful and it's not available to everybody, you're going to have a less educated, less productive society, and you're going to have an economy that's not as vibrant as it could be. And so we treat this like a public good. Let's draw it as if it wasn't. Public good meaning available to everybody. So let's say this was run by the free market. Here's the, actually, let's do this. Let's make that demand curve. Touch my x-axis, and we're going to say that that right there is 100% of kids. And there's some price associated with that. Just answer me this question.
Don't have to write this. Right here is 100% of kids getting free K-12 education. And right here is about half the population getting an education. Is this socially optimal? What would be socially optimal? Less? Yeah, I think most of it would say it would be 100. But what economists would say, so we have everybody on board, liberal, conservative, the entire spectrum, is something more than the market. So socially optimal, so write this. Socially optimal is more than market quantity. So the market fails, right? K-12 education, if we left it up to just a free market society, we'd have a failure in our society. But we don't do this. Now, some underdeveloped countries do, right? They remain in this stage of development because they don't have as much of an educated society. The problem is, so now let's write something with P1 here. This doesn't include something. This doesn't include social benefits. So write that there if you would. I'll zoom in too. So in underdeveloped countries where you have to pay to go to school, that price isn't taking into account that by having someone else educated next door to you, to have the entire community educated, that has a real value to society. So this price is far too high because it's not including the benefits that are accruing to other people outside the transaction. This is only including the benefits that go into those people who are buying the access to go to school and those teachers and administrators that are getting paid. So what do we do in the United States? Tell me here. What do we do? Supply and demand. What determinant, what curve? I'll give you a hint. What percent of students get free education? Free indirect or direct, right? You don't have to pay when you sign up. Everyone, so we're at 100%, all right? So our demand's fulfilled. So what happens to supply? What kind of determinant would shift out that supply curve to go to 100%? A lot of it is subsidizing, right? It's a whole lot of subsidy. So that what we do in our society is we've decided, well, this would be a market failure if we left this up to the free market. So do this, do a supply curve way down here and put S subsidy. We subsidize it. We've just corrected for that externality. So externality means that whenever there's a, so like we talked about with gas, when you buy gas, you get the gas and you get to go somewhere. The proprietor, the person at the gas station gets your money, you both benefited. But what happens to people outside the transaction? Like if I have asthma, what happens? And then if I have asthma, it makes my asthma worse and I might not have to be able to go to work. It might, in fact, it kills, right? Particulate matter from unburned gasoline kills, what is it, 3 million? I'm going to have that later in a note. It's 3 million people a year worldwide, 200,000 in the United States each year prematurely. So the buyer and the seller get benefit, but then somebody outside the transaction is harmed. Here is something similar, but the opposite. The teacher gets paid on the supply side. The student gets educated on the demand side, and who benefits by having a society that's well educated? Everyone. They're the entire society. So not just the teacher getting paid, not just the one student benefits, but all of society gets that positive benefit of having an educated society. So we call something like this a positive, a market like this, something that has positive externalities. We will focus on this exclusively next week when we talk about our healthcare system. And your assignment next week is to build a better healthcare system. And I'm going to give you a bunch of options, a bunch of research on it that's fairly well summarized, and not, you're not going to have to read about every country in its entirety, but it'll be summarized in bullet points, and you'll get to pick which system you think is the best. In our system, if you have more money, you get better care, but we do help people who are poor get their health care. More on that next class. Right, now let's come back to something more familiar. Let's do gas. So every economist believes this about K-12 school. Every economist, left, right, center, conservative, liberal, there's a market failure and we need to correct for it. Gasoline too, as I've mentioned. So again, let's not do demand like it is, meaning more what? That demand curve would be more inelastic. Let's just do it here like it's regular 45-degree angle. Here, what's not included in that cost or that price here? What's not included? You burn gasoline, someone else. Okay, well, they have to pay what? Their medical bills, their funeral bills, they lose time at work, they lose that income. That is a societal cost. So this doesn't include societal cost. I'm going to say social cost. It's mispriced. And even the most conservative economists would say this is mispriced because it's not taking into account the harm it's causing to other people outside the transaction. We're paying too little for gas. Here we're paying too much. Am I too much? Society pays the price you and I pay at the pump is not taking into account all of the costs that are accrued by others who are not in the transaction. The oil company gets its money. I get my gas and I get to go somewhere. But then my ex-wife who has asthma, when she breathes polluted air, has to go to the hospital. I'm not paying her medical bills anymore. Sorry to giggle. And the oil company is not paying her medical bills. In other words, I've externalized that to her, right? We have a great relationship. I don't mean to bag on her. Yeah. Danny.
But if we only get tax,
Right. Good memory.
why don't the government tax more?
Well, we'd vote those suckers out, wouldn't we? Right? Yeah, I mean, it's about a balance, right? It's about a balance and finding the right policy. So I'm going to get there to the right policy because, okay, let's say, let's fix this problem. Gas is now $200 a gallon. Problem fixed. You going to reelect me? Right? We still got to get by on a carbon-based economy still. So it's a process.
The gas companies are like,
Back up to over $6 an hour. Don't even get me started today. They're taking it, well, a little bit. They're taking advantage of the fact that there are a couple of refineries that are apparently getting maintenance right now. Do I believe that? I'm not sure. Remember, there's only 4 big companies in California. They're also saying that because of the hurricane in Florida, that some of the refineries in New Orleans aren't running at full speed. Maybe, but really, that doesn't affect us. That's not our market. So let me just drop it right there before I throw something. Okay, back to this. How much is used here? Too much or too little? Too much is used here. So what is socially optimal? What is socially optimal is less. Every economist would agree to this, even the most conservative economist who says, you know what, if pollution's a big deal, people will change over time. But we don't, let me be a conservative here. Our economy runs on fossil fuels. Full stop. Right? We don't have the technology there to run our economy on electric yet. And so for the time being, we have to live on this kind of fuel. And the more we tax citizens, the less standard of living they're going to have. And over time, we will get to another place, but there's no need to rush. And there's no need to create huge gas prices and huge amounts of regulation that slow our economy more. Science is about, I'm going to still be a conservative and talk about science. Science is about uncertainty. We don't know for sure exactly when the tipping point's going to be. And yes, more and more conservatives who used to say climate change wasn't real are coming and going, no, we see it. We just don't agree with these liberal ideas of how we need to change everything right away. And so we need to do this incrementally. and we need to do this in a way that's pro-business. Conservatives, anybody? Applause? No conservatives, or I didn't win you over? One hand clap? Okay, thank you. All right. I'm going to continue on that theme later and hopefully stick that a little bit better than I just stuck that. So the reality is, let's write this down, 3 million people worldwide, 200,000 US die due to pollution, die early, I should say, or die prematurely. What am I not even taking into account here? 3 million worldwide, 200,000 US every year die early because they're breathing in particulate matter from gasoline. What have I completely left out? Paradise. What have I left out? Fires likely made worse by the fire in Paradise, the fire in Berry Creek, the fire over in Forest Hill this year, the fire that one day will come to my house in Cohasset, in my forest, that's dying. My forest is dying. 20% of the trees are dying. Why are they dying? Drought, likely the beetle that comes with drought, and likely, we can't be positive, but very likely climate change is making this drought worse and longer. And so the fire in Paradise had multiple causes. The key to a sophisticated mind is the recognition of multiple causality. We have to understand that some events have multiple causes. So, sorry, I'm just going to say this. When Donald Trump said that people needed to rake leaves more, that wasn't very sophisticated, right? He wasn't making a very sophisticated point. He was saying there was one thing. Now, do raking leaves around your house help? Does that help? Absolutely, it helps. Damn, do I rake leaves and blow leaves away from my house? Because if the embers come up against the leaves of my house and they start burning, that'll burn my house. So did he have some truth there? There's a small piece of truth, right? But there are other parts to it. The other part is PG&E had a shitty maintenance of their electricity in that substation or whatever it was. The other piece is climate change, right? That dry forest for so long was just ready to blow up. Those high winds at 70 miles an hour was another freak occurrence too. And then also, we have not been allowing fires to happen. And fires are a natural part of the environment, and we need to let fire happen more, says anybody who knows anything about fire. But we're now so scared of big fires that we're not even doing small burns. So there's a lot of components there, but my point being this, I'm not even including here anything related to climate change that the use of gas makes worse, right? The hurricane in Florida, we can't say for sure that hurricane was made worse or is caused by climate change, but we know hurricanes are coming more frequently and more violent and likely due to warmer waters that are caused by climate change. So what I'm leaving out here is even any of the negative effects of climate change brought on by our use of gasoline. Sierra Pacific.
Well, they actually sold out.
Okay.
So I wanted to get
Absolutely.
So that was his take on it. I really like to see when people actually doing the work.
Right. And he's got a piece of the puzzle. There's no doubt about that. There's a really good book called Big Burn by Timothy Egan. It talks about how, so the Forest Service became in charge of fighting fires. So the Forest Service in the turn of the century, people didn't really care about having national parks. It wasn't a big deal to us. And the Forest Service was looking for a way to get more funding from Congress. And there was a giant fire in, I think, Idaho, swept through a town and killed hundreds of people. And the Forest Service went in and fought it, and they were valiant and heroic in fighting that fire and saving some people. And it became this big public relations event. And so the Forest Service thought, okay, I think we've got a way to fund ourselves. We'll fight fires. And then they got their funding to fight these big fires. And what happened? It went probably a lot too far fighting fires and not letting them be a natural part of the landscape. But let me make sure I'm also reinforcing too, it's multivariate, right? It's that, but it also is climate change.
I guess part of the solution too, like I don't know, there are studies that say that negative impacts in children's minds.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, that's probably not, I don't know, true it is, like I don't.
No, my understanding is so back to our last class, actually, when we were talking about genetics, if you are exposed to certain toxins, that can set up genes to go awry and turn out to create disadvantages in your mental capacity and your mental well-being. So indeed, pollution has a lot of other vectors or avenues which can cause harm.
I don't think we talked about it in this class or was it the other class? I don't think there's a genetics.
Oh, I was referring to my Econ 2 students we were talking about genetics last class. Yeah. Okay. So moving on from what do we do? What do we do in California? What do we do in this market? Tax and what do we have to add? We have to add something into the gasoline, right? There's a summer formula and a winter formula. We're about to go to the winter formula that's going to bring the cost down. So how do you feel about that? What's it going to do to the pollution level? Back up. Cost and benefits, right? Yeah. Nick, right? Nick, Mario, got it.
Like why winter and summer?
Well, it's when you use the summer blend and when you use the winter blend. And the summer blend, I hope I'm not wild at a wag is a wild ass guess. So I hope this isn't a wag. But my guess is, my hope informed guess is that the summer blend is when people are driving more, thus causing more pollution. So we need that in there to cause less because there's so many more drivers. And the winter we need less because people aren't going on vacation as much. That's my less than wag. So we tax and regulate. So here's what we do. Supply moves in. Do you know more than me?
Well, California doesn't have actual winter blends. California doesn't get cold. And but other states do because the cold like the gasoline, like they makes the water come out and then obviously makes well with the gasoline things and everything. So there is a winter blend, but it's not in California.
There's a
We
we use
use it.
a winter blend, but it's probably not one used in winter
it's probably
states.
less.
Because Newsom's talking a lot right now about we need to go to the winter blend, which just means probably away
It's
from.
more like
Yeah. But somebody knows actually how engines work. Yeah. You're specialized in something different than me. So notice what happens here. Notice the price is now higher. Oh, sorry. Notice with the supply moving in with more taxes and regulation, even though we don't like it, right? It's bringing us to more social optimal outcomes because it's taking into account some of those social costs that we're externalizing onto others. Think about how this works. You buy the gas station sells it to you, but who's affected? People outside the transaction, and it affects them negatively. So we call a market like this something that has negative externalities. What else has negative externalities? What are the things that you might buy, legal or illegal, that cause harm to people outside of the transaction? Tobacco, secondhand smoke has negative externalities. What do we do to tobacco? Tax the hell out of it, right? I don't smoke, but I think it's pretty expensive. What's a pack? Anybody want to admit they know what a pack is? Huh, $12 for some tobacco leaf. Wow. So we tax the hell out of it because it has negative effects, not only on other people, but on that person themselves that then might become somebody we have to pay for if they're poor for their healthcare. What else? Negative externalities. I don't know, meth, right? I mean, fentanyl? No, because they're illegal, but do they have when someone uses meth, does that negatively harm other people? I would say most definitely their families, their friends, society as a whole. Sorry, I'm not being generous to people on meth. Let's get them into treatment, of course, but what else? Chico, Chico, what happens here? Weekends? Alcohol. Does alcohol have negative externalities? Does weed have negative externalities? Why do you say so?
It's super motivated.
Would you buy that? So for some people, that's the case, right? Do we all have to agree? Right, not you, though. Okay. So, but
Like, I feel like that's more of a personality trait, like being like unmotivated or.
Yeah, it's like,
That's more of a.
Yeah, but does it get better when you smoke weed?
yeah, we could spend the rest of the class on this and we're not going to. Moving on. All right, so now let's go to normative economics. So let's break, that was all positive. We know that. Now normative. So we're looking at this problem from both a positive perspective, what are the facts and the data, and then what are our opinions and choices. So this is opinion. Subjective. And so for us, the opinion or what is of subjective nature is how to change the market failure of, let's just say, gas. Now, I haven't done this in years, but I had a class the other day say they weren't really familiar with the left-right spectrum in American politics.
Like liberal and.
Yeah. So I'm sorry if I'm going to bore you here, but I had a class say, what's that mean? Do we all know? Okay, so over here, we call this the right. This is who? Conservatives. So what does it mean to be a conservative?
Probably don't like abortion.
Capitalism, which means what? Capitalism means what? Yeah, but underneath it, freedom, right? Personal freedom. I would say both fiscal and conservative. Well, no, let's go with fiscal because, okay, conservatives tend to have, oh boy, don't walk into a trap here, Price. There tends to be more, okay, got this. There tends to be an affection for traditional values of earlier times when marriage was a certain way, when relationships between genders were a certain way and gender identities were a certain way.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, okay. It tends to be that. I'm not saying always an absolute, there tends to be that tradition, right? Conserve old values. Now, here, do we want to interfere with the market? Let the market be free, get the hell out of the way. The market knows best. But even a conservative economist would agree that there are market failures. So they have their own set of solutions. Now on the left, I'm talking about the left, who am I talking about? Liberals. Also, you could call progressives. I, in fact, moreover, don't draw this. I saw during COVID, there seemed to be this meeting point of liberals and conservatives. It didn't seem to be apart. They seemed to be coming together on certain things. Vaccines being a scam, right? I saw that on the far left and I saw it on the far right. You know, Bill Gates is putting chips into me. It was far left, it was far right. A couple other populist things. I saw this. I don't know if I'm seeing that as much anymore. Do you feel me on this? Did you see that? Yeah. By the way, I've had 2 vaccines and 3 boosters. And
Yeah, I was gonna say.
no, and I'm totally fine, totally fine. So take me as an example. Now, in the center, there's a horrible saying about the center that if you're in the center, if you're in the road, that's more likely where you're going to get hit. Now, you know where economists find themselves? Right here in the center. This is the economist. We tend not to be ideologically driven. One side's right, one side's wrong. We tend to be what solution works in this case. Now, liberals, if they are, and you know, over in conservative, I could even say libertarian, right? Anybody libertarian? And do you know libertarians? Do you know what he means by his libertarian belief? I didn't hear it. But I would take it further. I would say yeah, Mario. I think to some extent it is get the government out of every decision. If you want to be trans, gay, that's not my problem or my solution, right? If you want to smoke weed or do heroin, right? That's a libertarian. That's not my problem. It's all about liberty with a capital L. If you want to buy a ghost gun on the dark web, buy a ghost gun. The guy who ran the Silk Web, the dark web shopping center for drugs, prostitution, guns, hitmen. I suppose hit women too. He ran that. What was he? Obviously very, and he believed it was going to change the world. He was a libertarian. He said the more freedom you give people, the better the outcome. In some respects, Elon Musk is a libertarian. Right? Fewer rules, the better. I don't think always is that way, but he tends towards that libertarian side. Where do they fit? I think to some extent you're right. A little liberal on the social, a little more conservative on don't have rules for us. All right. So now, what would they say normatively about environmental policy? What would liberals say? What do we need to do about the problem of pollution, problem of climate change? Yeah. So let me say it in these terms: top-down regulation. At the what level? At the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, at the world level? Where would they say this needs to be? At the top, they would say we need to have a global cap on all pollution. But I mean, good luck, right? So I'd say top-down regulation at federal level. Meaning, so during COVID, when we had the lockdowns, remember how we had a county-wide system of who should be on lockdown and who not? But it seemed at times we had a system that wasn't really taking into account that Alturas is as sparsely populated as, I don't know, the moon. And, you know, LA is LA. And we seem to have regulations that hit both of them kind of the same, or Butte County. If Butte County has Chico, it has Oroville, but it also has my town of Cohasset with 12 people. Okay? And we had the guy up there who runs the country store got busted because he wasn't enforcing the mask mandate. And it's a bunch of country folk up there. And it didn't seem, none of us were like, you know, we don't care, first of all, because we're country folk. But also, you know, that doesn't fit us. That's not LA. If it was LA, right, you need to wear a mask because you're around thousands of people. Up there, we're around 12 other people. And so top-down regulation means that you've got, here's the rule, and it's a rule for everybody, no matter what's going on in your area. So for example, should we have some top-down regulation on the amount of pollution that comes out of cars in LA?
I would say, the evidence would say, probably, yeah. Should they maybe be less stringent in Alturas? You don't have to agree with me. But my problem with top-down regulation is that it's one policy fits every area, when we're really a big country with lots of different population densities and different circumstances. And so here would be, the critique would be, this might not be useful to Cohasset, but it would be useful to LA. Over here, conservatives would say this: consumer sovereignty. It's up to the consumer to decide. If gasoline really is killing people, if pollution is really that bad, if climate change is really burning down Paradise and then Berry Creek and then Forest Hill, then eventually we're going to all realize this is a big deal and we're going to start using less gas and buying more electric cars. So they would say, if it's a problem, people will change their buying habits. Does this make some sense? Even if you don't agree with it? That as we're seeing bigger and more intense hurricanes, as we're seeing bigger and more intense fires, as we're seeing more and more evidence that climate change is likely playing a role in that, people like me went out and bought a Prius. All right, I did that. No one forced me to buy a Prius. I know my girlfriend laughs at me every time I drive my Prius to her house. She's into cars and she says, you've got negative points in your car. And I was willing to take those negative points because, number one, I do want to save money, but I recognize these things, so I'm going to make a different choice. Now, well, I'm asking you to see the validity in here. Can you see how there's an argument that maybe this isn't going to cause change to happen fast enough? If climate change is really something that's near a tipping point, maybe we need a bigger nudge than this. And let me say one other thing about federal regulation. Here would be something to, let's say, end use of polluting products sooner, maybe now. And let me say, I'm making a bit of an exaggeration to make a point here. I know people who are very much motivated by climate change and wanting to change our habits, and they would say we all need to stop eating meat. We all need to stop driving cars and take public transportation and walk more, and we need to do that tomorrow. Anybody down? Even those people who get in their car drive home. I went to conferences with these folks and I said, why don't we carpool and drive? And they said, no, we're going to fly down. Put your money where your mouth is, man. That's consumer sovereignty. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Plug-in insect products that are very high in protein, very low in carbon output. Cows, sparks, and methane is one of the worst carbon emissions. And then all the gasoline used in transporting the cows. Cows are a really bad thing for the climate. We need to get off of eating cow. Yeah, methane. Yeah. Yeah. But burgers taste really good, and the world is getting richer, and steak is a what kind of good? Normal good, so people are buying more of it. With what? Oh, that methane gas?
Yeah.
I've seen cartoons of people with ideas getting cows together and doing something. Let's work on that business. So is everyone going to be down for this? No cars tomorrow, and I'm exaggerating, right? Okay. Or did some people have a problem? I know some conservatives did in California, said no more gas cars by 2035. Some people felt like, whoa, that's way too fast. How will that happen? I'll comment this way.
that's, I think in California law, we're just trying to, because we're such a huge market, that's gonna move Ford and GM and Chrysler to all do more electric cars. But when it comes down to 2035, if we're not there, I think we're gonna give it a pass. Yeah, have a say. I believe those are not, is it this year? They're already banned. You can keep your own. I have gas powered power tools, but I can't find new ones apparent. You know that? For
I don't know.
either this, it might be next year or the year after. So this is top down regulation. No more gas blowers. Right, so they're so loud, but beyond the loudness, it is that they're polluting. Right, so understand the benefits and the drawbacks of both sides. But where do I find myself as an economist? No, but where do I find myself as an economist? Right in the middle. So what would we say? Economists would say two things, and they're two things that you know about, and they're in the determinants of supply and demand. They are taxes. Actually, there are three things: regulation and subsidies. But which ones? Which are the most effective ones? The good ones, but how do we determine that? So I'm going to digress now and talk about taxes in detail. So imagine this, the first source of tax income tax. Income tax, and in paren, I'm going to write marginal. This is a system when you make more money, you pay a higher tax rate. Let me just, I think. Showing you the Wikipedia page for the US tax system will help. I'm going to share, change it up so it's a little less useful for me. Look on this side here, on the right side, and highlight it. This one isn't very useful at all. There we go, perfect. Let's do on single here. Here's how our tax system works. For every dollar you make between 0 and 10,000, you pay 10% of that to the federal government. This is federal taxes. For every dollar between 10,000 and 41,000, you pay 12%. For every amount between 40 and 89,000, you pay 22%. And then notice all the way at the bottom. If you make more than $540,000, every dollar above that amount and only above that amount is taxed at 37%. So not all your income at 37%, but just that top amount. And if you make less, you pay those smaller tax rates. Stock gains are something completely different. They're taxed at a much lower rate, and that's a controversy. Warren Buffett, who is a famous, very wealthy investor, pays a very, very low tax rate because we tax investor gains very low, while his secretary pays much higher taxes, who makes a lot less. So we tax capital gains a lot less. Don't send me that, because it's a whole nother thing to deal with. Let's focus on this. Now, no, we had some discussion about how does this disincent work. I don't know if I agree that this disincent work, that if you make over $550,000, you have to pay 37 cents to the government. I mean, is that going to stop me from making $1 million? I have a hard time believing that, but I've heard that argument.
more importantly, what we're doing in total here is we're taxing work. And generally, when we've talked about taxing things, we've talked about taxing things we want people to do less of: smoke cigarettes, use gasoline. So here, maybe we change the system up and we eliminate income taxes. So I want to give you a few examples of how we can do this. So we could eliminate income taxes, and we could, so let me go down here. I'm going to leave some space. Actually, no, let me just do this here. Proposal. Here's a proposal. Eliminate income tax. Okay, what's the problem? Right, so now we don't have defense, education spending, road spending. So wait, we need to gather money somehow. So why not tax something that we don't want? So we'd call this, so eliminate income tax, institute, or, yeah. Pollution, otherwise known as a carbon tax. A little difficult to do, but you could do a study. There could be an independent commission, there could be a government body, government agency. We already do this with every single product in our country. We measure how their price changes over time. So we could have somebody look into what is the pollution content of every product. And based on how much pollution is used in the making of that product and the transporting that product to market, there could be a tax associated with it. So the more polluting product is what to the consumer? More expensive. The less polluting product is now relatively to that cheaper. And so what does that drive people to do? Buy the cheaper product. In other words, buy the less polluting product, right? So we do that. Just think this through with me, right? We do that, and people are still stuck with, you know, I want my iPhone that has lots of pollution in it. I'm willing to pay the tax. But then people start realizing, wait a minute, Google's come up with this better idea they have to have less pollution in their product, and people start moving to that, and we all as a society start moving away from polluting products. Great outcome. What's the problem there? The tax, we wouldn't collect any more taxes, right? You get that point? That if this is successful, then the government's broken. So that's a good problem, right? That'd be a great problem to get rid of pollution this way. My first point being, don't tax something that we want people to do, tax something we don't want people to do. But then let me add something to this. Okay, and then so let's just be utopian here. When no pollution, we can institute what's called a fair tax. And now I'm going conservative on you. So this was proposed by Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee, I believe, has a show on Fox, if not Fox, Newsmax. Mike Huckabee was the Republican governor for Arkansas. He ran for president under the Republican Party, I think a couple times a few years back. And Mike Huckabee makes a really good economic point. First of all, we tax income. We shouldn't be taxing income and income tax. What we should be taxing is consumption. Now, if we tax consumption, what are people going to do more of? You tax every dumb thing you buy. And think about, I don't know about if you're an Amazon person where you get online and you click buy and you arrive and you're like, oh. No? You guys, some of you, right? So it would make us not buy stupid stuff, right? It'd make us do what instead with our money? Save that money. Every dollar saved is then a dollar a bank has to invest in another business. If we could consume less and save more, we'd be much better off in the long run. So number one, get people to consume less junk. But the other problem is with our tax system is you've got millions of people who work but aren't taxed. people who grow marijuana. Right, are they putting in a W-2? I mean, some of the I know guys out on the coast who grow legally and they get taxed. Yeah, but you don't have to pay income tax. If you are in, any legal business, drug business, prostitution, gun running, anything illegal. So think, people selling meth or fentanyl. Right, are they paying income tax? And are they getting to use the public goods? Are they, sorry to demonize, but let me demonize a little bit. They're what we call free riders. They get to send their kids to school, but are they paying income tax for that school? Are they paying income tax for the police and fire protection, the police are running from, or the roads that are being maintained, right? They are free riders. This tax is a national sales tax. You get rid of all income tax.
Get ready for it. 20% national sales tax.
You get all your money. The feds take nothing. Now, the state of California probably will still take some. But you get all your money. I mean, my federal taxes are significant amounts of money, tens of thousands that I pay every year. I would love that not to go to the federal government that way, but tax me on my pollution, tax me on my consumption, then you're incenting me to do better things. You're incenting me not to buy polluting products. You're incenting me to save more money. That helps me in the long run. That helps my family in the long run. That helps the nation in the long run.
So have they ever proposed like a mixed deal between carbon tax and fair tax?
I've not seen that proposed.
Tax food?
So, beautiful, I was waiting for this. What's the problem with this tax?
Like say like what small businesses they'll go under if they say, oh, I don't want to go to the restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely that. And if you make cheap junk that people don't really need, right? That's how, but think about his question. What about food? This is inherently regressive. Our tax system, you notice how you made more money and you paid a higher percentage? That's progressive. You pay more as you make more. This system, you pay the same tax no matter what you make. So it's going to put a higher tax burden on the poor. But wait a minute, let's not give up yet. Yeah, but if I'm poor, I'm paying a bigger amount of my income just for food and medicine, while the wealthy person has a much bigger amount of money to deal with that. So here's what you do. You exempt food, right? You exempt medicine. What else do you exempt? Hmm?
Were you talking about how Canada was such a big using for carbon, right?
Or meth, yeah.
Well, yeah, so when it, it's just food, what about the?
So then we get into the weeds of, okay, then do we charge a higher tax on feed? Because of the pollution associated with it. But wait, we already got rid of pollution, right? That's what we stipulated. So it's good, we got rid of that. But you get how there's a problem here, that it's regressive? There are no perfect solutions. If there were perfect, easy solutions, we would have found them. Right? These are difficult choices, but it feels to me that climate change is a pretty monumental problem that we're facing. And I've seen in my lifetime, I have seen changes, and they're no doubt negative, and they're no doubt going to change how we live in some ways here in the North State. They're going to affect other countries much worse than us. They're going to affect places that have coastlines that are low-lying, and you're going to see millions, maybe billions of people migrate. And that's already, so in Europe, with the wars in the Middle East, they've seen migrants come in by the millions. I don't know if you followed the election in Italy or what's happening in Sweden. There's a huge backlash against immigration in those countries. They've gone actually back to a fascist party in Italy. I'm going to connect these dots. They went back to a party similar to Mussolini because they're so anti-immigrant, because so many immigrants came to their country. Now, I think at some level, I'm going to try to be careful here again. I get how a voter in Italy who is older, who's used to the old Italy, to see people from other countries coming into Italy, feel like their country is changing. Italy is not America. Right? America is a melting pot. This is what we are. Right? We are different cultures. Italy, I can see, if you have some input, being Sicilian, that you want to defend your culture a little bit. Right, you'd like to get your way of living? Yeah, yeah. Well, to some in Italy, with all these migrants, if they're lower skilled workers, now they have to compete with lower skilled workers. And so it is affecting them. So here's the point I'm trying to get to. Climate change, as it gets worse, and as billions of people have to migrate somewhere else, they're going to come to countries that maybe elect politicians who are, yikes, right? Because people are driven that way because of this mass migration that might happen. So beyond just, the effects of fires, of more heat deaths, there are other things political that this can lean into. All right. Just take a bit before we pack up. What should we do? What are your thoughts? Where do we go with this? Are any of these ideas interesting to you? What do we do, given that this is a problem? How do we fix it? We don't just give up. We're not going to be cynics in this class and just say, well, I'll die soon enough. Right? We're solution focused here. And so are any of these things palatable to you? I love hate nuclear. Nuclear is the way to go. If we could ramp up nuclear doesn't produce any emissions. It does produce waste that can last for tens of thousands of years that can destroy an entire city / community. So we have to learn how to.
But if done right.
If done right, right? But even if done right in Japan, when you get a earthquake and tsunami, then you lose an entire region. So it comes with incredible risks. But the promise of nuclear is incredibly expensive. But I think that's what most experts that I read who are more moderates, nuclear. There's our bridge. Because one day we will have a technology that will get the energy from the sun and the wind and the ocean that'll meet our needs. We will get there. We're not there yet. And so nuclear seems to be that bridge. Yes, they do. As water sources rise with climate change, yes. Again, no perfect solution. So something around nuclear could be an answer to this writing problem, right? The solution is not changing our tax structure. Our solution is subsidizing nuclear plants and getting clean, abundant energy through splitting an atom. Yes. Yeah, I mean, potential of death. I mean, the potential of death from a carbon emission is very low to you, right? But if you're near a nuclear plant, then the potential is a lot higher, although very, very small chance. Let me say one other thing. There is a technology where the military is pushing forward, where it's not this big, but the size of like a shipping container, where they have a nuclear reactor that can run a whole base. One of the, I think, game-changing inventions, if people can deal with their a bit irrational fear, is to have in every big town a container with a mini nuclear reactor. Okay, problems with that? What does that become? It becomes a target, right? If I really want to screw up my community. Yes. Hey, let me leave you with this. Let's observe both sides, positive and negative, but let's still focus on, and this that's saying just in this class, okay, but what can we do?